Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Debbie Simmons. Debbie is the legacy architect, a keynote speaker, best-selling author, and the CEO founder of Anchor Point, a multi-million-dollar nonprofit changing lives every day. With over 2 decades of leadership at the intersection of impact and exhaustion, Debbie equips high-capacity leaders to rebuild what success was never designed to carry alone. She's the creator of the Architecture of Trust, a structural framework that helps leaders diagnose where trust is leaking, and the Obedience Engine, a proprietary rhythm and decision-making model that aligns identity, trust, and forward movement. Her frameworks weren't built in theory, they were born under pressure. Today, Debbie is a trusted strategist to CEOs, founders, pastors, and high-level teams navigating leadership at scale. She doesn't just speak truth. She helps leaders structure their obedience, rebuild trust at the root, and lead from a place that holds under pressure. If you're successful but stretched, respected but unraveling, or tired but still performing, Debbie is your mirror, your strategist, and your challenger. Debbie, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. It is a pleasure having you on the program today.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be with you guys today.
Yes, and we had a really great pre-chat. Another fellow podcaster, Tony Lynch, did a blast email to several podcasters he knew, and I responded and emailed you, and we find ourselves today doing a podcast.
Yeah, this is where we sit right now.
You got it. So, from what I understand, Debbie's in Houston, Texas, and we were talking before we started recording, is that I'm in upstate New York, and right now I'm sitting in my podcast shirt with a blanket in my lap because it's like rainy and like probably 50 degrees out. But Debbie shared with me that she has her own blanket in Houston, so I don't feel so bad now. So
Very much true.
it's a lot warmer in Houston all year round than it is all year round in upstate. But I think both areas has its charm. So let's get to the business at hand, which is understanding your journey, understanding how that shaped your path. So let's go from there, which leads into my first question, is tell our listeners about the major experiences that have shaped who you are today.
Sure. And I would say, just like most of us, we all have journeys, right? And they have highs and they have lows. And so I like to tell people, just buckle your seatbelt. Mine has highs, has lows. But I remember, interestingly enough, as a teenager, I had this overarching desire that I wanted to be this young grandma. And I am a get it done girl. And so I knew I had to find a guy, fall in love, get married, have children, and then I could be a young grandma. And, so I set out to do just that. And when I was in college, I met the guy, fell in love. I did get my degree, and we ultimately got married, and I was like, let's have children, right? And so off we go on this journey, and infertility became a big part of our game at that point. And it was about 4 or 5 years of infertility and trying all kinds of things. And, really, really was a big struggle for me as far as my identity and the fact that I was the person that had the issue. And I was like, my value as a woman, as a potential mom, as a wife, I just really struggled with all that. In the very end, though, we did get pregnant. And with some fertility medicine, we got pregnant with twins. And around 13 weeks, I thought that was good because I thought I'd do them two at a time. So that would be great since it took so long. I ended up attempting to miscarriage at 13 weeks and ended up in my high risk OBGYN's office on that Monday. And when we went in there, we did an ultrasound and found three. And then she said, let's take a picture of those three. And I looked at the screen and I said, oh, there's four. And so we found out there was four, and that totally rocked our world because we had kind of figured out what we were going to do with two. And now we're like back to, oh my gosh, how do you figure your way through this? So every day was a big journey to figure out how to make it to the next one, right? And our goal became get them to 30 weeks. And if we got them to 30 weeks, their lungs would be developed enough that they'd have a good shot at making it. At 26 weeks, I found myself standing in water and one of the baby sacs had ruptured. And so they put me in the hospital, hopefully to see if I could stay long enough to get him to the 30. And the next morning, contractions came crashing in. And the one had stuck his hand through my cervix and was saying, hey, I'm coming. And I was like, stop everything. This is just can't happen now. Put it all back. No, right? And the doctor's looking at me like, no, you have to deliver the baby. And so a little while later, Zach was born and they placed Zach in my arms and I loved him and I rocked him and I, sang sweet nothings to him and off he drifted into eternity. And then we had to wait to see what my body would do. Would my body reject the others or would I be able to carry them? And a couple of hours went by. I got very, very sick. And the doctor came in the room and she said, you're going to have to deliver the other babies. And I looked at her just for some sliver of hope that there was a way around this. And she shook her head no. And I just closed my eyes and resolved again to figure my way through. Josh, then Nate, then Chris, and I held each one of them and rocked them and loved them until they drifted into eternity. That night, we sat with empty hands and broken hearts. That is probably the biggest, most difficult thing that I've had to walk through. There's been lots of other big things, but I'm going, that totally changed everything about my world that I knew before. So,
Yeah, you're talking multiple child loss, which I think has its own set of challenges. My history, I've experienced the death of an adult daughter, single child loss, but, multiple child loss. I would imagine the challenges for that have to be a little bit different than a single child loss. And can you speak to that in terms of the similarities or differences that multiple child loss share with single child loss?
yeah, well, what I would say is loss, so that there's a lot of similarities. And what I find is that grief is an interesting monster and it shows up in different ways for all of us. Even if our loss was exactly the same, we would all process it different. My husband processed it very differently than I did. But, so I would say, hey, that is a piece of it too. The interesting thing about the quadruplets was that because the pregnancy was so high risk, we actually had a lot of time to process, and we're just so blessed that we made it to the next day, every day of the pregnancy, that we knew the seriousness of the situation. So we weren't surprised. This was so high risk the whole time that we were very, very cognizant of the potential and tried to really focus on, okay, let's just get it to the next day. Let's just get to the next day. Let's just get to the next day. So it's more like living with a terminal illness, maybe is a better way, because we had that. But in the end, I think we all have the same questions to deal with. We all probably struggle with the question of why, and trying to figure out the answer to that. And for me in the hospital, I dealt with that night because I just was like, I don't know any other way to get through here without God in my life. And he just said I had to lay down the why. And I'm like, that's the last thing I got. I don't have the boys. I don't have nothing. I got all this pain. And if I just had the why answer, but what I learned was that the why answer means I get stuck. Because if I would have got the answer that day, I guarantee you my next question would have been why, because I wouldn't have thought that answer was good enough. Because it didn't bring my boys back, it didn't take away my pain and everything. And so the fact that I was able to get to laying down the why easily, I think that that saved me a lot of struggle on the backside. And maybe that's because my front side was different and everything, but I very quickly got to the question of how do I survive? I want to know how I survive.
Yep.
And it was take the next best step. And that's exactly what I did. Every day, thousands of times, was figure out how to do that, to work my way through my grief.
Yeah. And, it's taken just baby steps, one step forward, another step forward, another step forward. You made a really interesting point about the whys, because my daughter was 18 when she died. And I asked myself the why questions all the time. And I think in early grief, I think that's typical because
Yeah.
we try to ask the why questions, I think, in an attempt to wrap ourselves around the enormity of the situation and try to make some sense out of it.
Sure, to get meaning, right?
Yeah.
And it won't satisfy. It doesn't like relieve me of anything. It just makes me want to ask why again.
Well, and you're right. I mean, the other thing that you had mentioned is that any answer you try to figure out to a why question isn't going to bring your children back. Didn't bring my daughter back. But yet we ask the questions anyway until we realize that unless God came down to my house, brought my daughter back and said, we made a mistake. We're going to give you your life back as you once remembered it. That would have been the only thing that would have satisfied me. So once I stopped asking the why questions, I embraced the quiet. Then I got the clarity that I needed and just focused on trying to move forward as capable as I could to move forward in early grief until I eventually began to re-embrace living again and with purpose.
Just so you know, I'm not some spiritual giant. We're not spiritual. I'm like literally my next best step might be pull the covers off my head, brush my teeth, walk around 5 minutes, and then I'm done for the day. So because that's all I could handle. But it was a positive step.
Yeah.
And that is what God's looking for. That's what we need is just positive steps, one after another. And for me, sometimes I went backwards on some days, but it was like, okay, what's the next best step now? And I still use that today. I use that, lay down the why, ask, how do I survive? And then once I figure that out, then I move on to the question of how do I thrive?
Yep.
Because I want to live again. I want to breathe. I want to have joy. I want all these things all the time. And so they've been a blessing to me, even though I had to learn them in a difficult situation.
And our survival skills, however we built them up from previous challenges, are going to help us during grief because we have to be able to survive, work through the pain before we can begin to thrive again. Because we have to sit in that pain too. We can't just suppress it. We can't run away from it. We have to sit in it. We have to in some way make friends with it and as a precursor to then beginning to embrace thriving.
Yeah,
So
very much.
I want to talk a little bit about Anchor Point, your nonprofit. Tell us what or who inspired the creation of the nonprofit Anchor Point. What is the mission and what are the services that you provide to families in need?
So Anchor Point, actually, it comes out of that lost journey. Okay. And after several years, God just kind of planted this seed to build Anchor Point. And at first I was like, no, that's going to take too much time, too much energy. And he just wouldn't relent as he doesn't. And I finally said, okay, but the goal of Anchor Point is really to help families thrive. And so we do that through our Obria Medical Clinic, where we're dealing with families when they are finding out they're pregnant and they don't know what to do and they're overwhelmed and they're scared. And so we come alongside of them at that point and help them begin their journey. And sometimes that's complicated with Medicaid and all kinds of different things that they might get into that, they're just looking at you with these big eyes going, I don't know what to do. Or they're scared or they are contemplating maybe an abortion and it's usually because they just don't have hope. So we come alongside of them there. And then in our Hope Family Center, we do case management of the baby moms and baby dads to go, most kids don't come with instruction manuals. They are the instruction manuals. And so we get to work alongside them that way. And then we have our Hope Community initiatives, which have our prenatal classes, our parenting classes. We have recovery groups for sexual abuse, for abortion, for trauma. And then we run therapeutic camps for families who have adopted children from hard places, or maybe they are grandparents raising grandchildren, or adoptive families and things like that. And these kids have kind of trauma issues that we need to help these families with. And then we have a maternity home for girls that are pregnant and homeless that we work with each and every day to help get them a plan over the next 18 months so that they have a way to support themselves, take care of the baby, can begin to make good choices. And we do that on an everyday basis. And so it was God inspired and I was obedient. And, the truth is that really it's a way for my boy's legacy to live on. I want to be a person of impact. So I want to leave a legacy, and Anchor Point is the legacy that I can live. And if we set it up as we've continued to build it, it will still be here after I'm gone. And so it will continue to make an impact, which is what we, all desire to see.
It sounds like you have really just multifaceted services for all types of parents who are going through challenges. I like the fact that you help also young moms as well build up the necessary parenting skills and just the practical skills to be able to take care and support their child, because I've told my students at Utica University, just because you marry the love of your life doesn't make you great parents, because it takes a different set of skills to do that.
I say that parenting is the only job you can get with no training.
But, I think, Debbie, for me, I would
Yeah.
love to see as part of the marriage contract, regardless of whether it's the Catholic religion or any other religion, you take a parenting course.
Oh, yeah.
That's part of the deal. Either you go through go through an organization like Anchor Point, where you
Yeah.
go through some Catholic Charities organization or another organization that specializes in parenting skills, and take a parenting skills course. Because I discovered, again, our children teach us and our greatest teachers about parenting. I realized that it took a different set of skills, and it took me a while to kind of become comfortable with that and realize
Oh,
that
yeah.
it's different going from being partners in marriage to being
Well,
parents in marriage.
yeah.
It's a different set of challenges.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many girls I've heard say, and they let me take the baby home.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know, it's for real, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you have love and you lead with love, the skills will come. I think that's the first thing. If you love the child that you gave birth to, or you love the child that's a part of your family, then the skills will develop. It might be trial and error, but it'll develop. And as long as you have that unbiding, almost unconditional love for your child, the rest with work, will fall into place. So, you are the legacy architect. How did you come up with that name? And tell us, is the legacy architect, does that go beyond the work you do in Anchor Point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So part of the
tell me
yeah.
more about that.
Okay. So part of the reason that legacy architect is the name. First of all, you got to know I'm an engineer by training. So, and I love to build things. Okay. So building ministry, building all kinds of stuff is right up my alley. I am not a maintain girl. I'm like, what can we build now? Who can we impact? But the legacy piece is I really am really serious about wanting people to know that they want to leave a legacy. In order to do it, they have to live a legacy. So you don't get a legacy without building it. So that's where the legacy architect kind of came in. And if any staff member of mine, I'm always interested in how they were uniquely placed here on this earth and how do we get them where they are leaving legacies and, for the future because they're living them now. So that's how it kind of came to be. And then I get to do a lot of mentoring and coaching with different executive leaders and stuff like that. And this applies there because we want them to be impact players also, because think about it. If the executive director or the CEO is very strategic, living out their life that way, then that has a trickle down effect to everyone. And I just think this whole world would be a better place if we were all living out of our uniqueness that we were created for and impacting people. And so that's how the legacy kind of thing came to be, is because I remember very clearly sitting in the hospital and going, eternity matters. Eternity matters. What I do and how I go about my life and the impact that I make, it's important. And it became very elevated then. It was like the whole world just was black and white. You knew one side or the other. It just cleared everything in my head. And so I was like, this changes how I go about what I do now and how I pursue my life.
Yeah, because when we commit to creating a legacy, it's for anybody that comes into our path who's experienced challenge, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of cultural background, regardless of philosophy, because basically we are all bound together. We're human beings. We're bound together because we're part of the human race. And we're all unique in our own ways, and being able to meet their uniqueness with our uniqueness, I think just what makes the world a more inclusive place, a more tolerant place where we sit and witness each other's beliefs as opposed to judging each other's beliefs.
And I think in the end, we all bleed red. And so there is common ground if we can find it and we seek it. But I want us all making impact and because we're here uniquely for a reason. And so a lot of times we just don't pursue that because we don't stop and think about it. We move at such fast paces that we just don't even leave any room anymore to think about being intentional. And that is the art that we need to add back to our lives.
So you think it sounds like what I'm hearing you say too, it's like the fast pace that we live that, all the results oriented, messages that we hear in society prevents us really from embracing our true purpose at times. Am I correct in
Sure, because you can stay on that phone all the time if you're not careful, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, I just wasted 30 minutes. I gotta put that down, and it's like you get children, you get different things, you got all these demands. As a CEO, I have all these demands. And the truth is, if I don't figure out how to build some quiet space in there for me, my head's just rattled with stuff all the time, right? And so I need to decompress to be able to give myself a way to be able to focus on what is my purpose? What is my calling? And how do I walk that out? But it's a good question for me as a CEO to go, am I really doing the only things that I can do? And if I'm not, if I'm doing things that other people can do, how can we allocate those to those people so that I can be free to build or to do the next thing or to figure out how to impact? And we ought to all do those kind of inventories. I just think we get busy.
Sometimes I think that individuals don't think that the stories that they've created for themselves, they think either they're secondary to what they're supposed to be doing, or they don't think their stories are going to make a difference to anybody or to very few people. So they don't embrace their uniqueness. But for me, everybody's got a story. Everybody's story is going to have an impact. We're never going to have an impact if we don't share our story.
I would agree with that for sure.
It's kind of like that imposter syndrome. We think, we haven't really done enough or been through enough. Well, heck, we've all been through our series of challenges. We've all been through tragedies. Tragedy is defined differently for everybody, but it doesn't mean I can't meet a person at their worst tragedy. I can do that because I can tap into the pain of my worst tragedy and meet them there. So that, to me, if we can, I think learn to do that, we can shatter that kind of illusion that our uniqueness may not be good enough.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we, until we tell our story, we don't realize the impact. Like for me, obviously I have lived 30 plus years with losing my boys, right? And I'm like, when I wrote the book and put the book out there and people I was shocked at the impact that it was making. And I was like, oh my gosh, because it's been my story for so long. It just seems normal to me. Yeah. And so for the other person, they're so encouraged because I was able to walk through that and I can still smile. And I'm like, oh, well, then I need to tell that more because I want people to be encouraged. Right. And So I don't tell it because it brings glory to me, but because it helps others figure their way.
Yeah.
People were gracious enough through my journey through the years to reach back and pull me along and maybe even catapult me ahead of them. And so I want to reach back and encourage people and pull them along and catapult them along too, because that's the richness of life, not just getting to the end. It's the journey and who gets to go with us.
Absolutely. And I mean, if we shared our story for selfish reasons, there wouldn't be altruism involved in it. I mean, I share my story in the event that it's going to help somebody else. And typically, it also, when an individual says they've been impacted by my story and in turn they share theirs, I become inspired by what they've been through. And I think we need to create a world of storytellers. The indigenous cultures and Native Americans are very big in storytelling. That's how they pass down their traditions to the future generations. And it's a powerful tool whether it's in business, whether it's in mental health, it's a very powerful tool to get individuals motivated and to help them develop some clarity and insight. So, I think as a legacy architect, yeah, I mean, building our stories is a big part of that. Also notice the engineering piece with the architecture of trust and the
Yeah.
obedience engine. So I'd be remiss as a podcast host if I left those out on the table. So what is the architecture of trust and the obedience engine?
Yeah. So the obedience engine is just the rhythm that we get once we kind of learn how the architecture of trust works. Okay. So when we're talking about architecture of trust in a business setting, we're talking about how does leadership alignment, decision clarity, and execution reliability kind of work together. And when one of those things is weak, then the trust of the structure is broken. Okay, we call it a trust leak. But the truth is that it slows the business down, it costs the business money, and ultimately lands everything back on the CEO's desk, which I know that by truth be told by what I do. But when we look at applying it on an individual level, and this is where I love it, and especially if we are open to growing, is, we all say that we trust something. And the truth is, you and I both trust very clearly the chair that we are sitting in right now. Okay. We didn't think about it. We sat in it and the structure held, right? And that we tested it, right? So so I might say something like, I trust God. Okay. And now, when the pressure goes up in my life, stresses come, whatever it is, the pressure starts to rise, we will know what I truly trust by what I do under pressure. Okay. I naturally, if we just look at how Debbie's kind of wired, I will go to, instead of trusting God, I will go to control and hustle because that's what I'm good at. Okay. And so I will default to those things. Those things aren't necessarily bad, but they're usually the maladaptive ways we have learned to survive.
Yeah.
Okay. So think about it. Why is control important to me? Well, when I lost my boys, how much control did I have? Zero,
Yep.
right? And it's interesting because the world celebrates the fact that I can control really well and the fact that I can hustle really well. And the truth is, Anchor Point has made it to the level it is because I do that really well. But if we want to continue to build Anchor Point, Debbie can't stay the same. And do I really want to stay the same? Control and hustle brings a lot of stress in my life and everything. And it doesn't bring me peace, joy, patience, long suffering, all those things that if I trust God, I could have. Right. And so I go, okay, if I'm controlling things like that, it's showing up. What could I do in my world to make a little tweak in my life that would allow me to maybe not have to go to controlling, but to go rely on God like I say that I want to, right? So maybe it is a quiet time after a stressful day, or maybe it is going for a walk. You just find some little tweak and you make a commitment to do it and you make it, and then you go on about your life. And then what you're going to find is, guess what? The pressure is going to go up again one day.
Mhm.
And when it goes up this time, do I use the structure that I put in place so that I can still trust God, or does that fail again? And then it's just managing that and changing that and growing in that over time. So now people say, "Oh, you're always calm in every situation." And I go, "Yeah, when stress comes my way, I generally say, minor detail, God's got it." Okay. I used to not do that. Right. And so I have learned that over time so that I can stay in a state of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self control, right? So that is really what the architecture of trust is for us as individuals. So, for your listeners, one of the really cool things is to just go, now that you're aware of that, think about the last time you got really stressed or something didn't go right, and how did you respond? And is that what you really want to trust? And see, the idea of control and stuff like that, that's fine for Debbie as long as Debbie can show up at 100% all the time. Then I can control and hustle my way. But as things get bigger, things get more complex, or 5 years ago, I had a injury that just about cost me my life and I couldn't keep up. Right. So what happened? It showed where structure was really weak in our organization. And there's no shame. The truth is, it's just data. And once you have the data, you can make the changes to strengthen the organization, strengthen your life so that the next time the pressure goes up, you all handle it differently. That's really the heart of the architecture of trust. It's very simple, but we all trust something. And is what you say really what you trust?
Yeah. And, I think when you're looking at a high pressure job, I think control is kind of a way that they can, I think if they can control it, they feel they're going to get better results, and, their staff is going to respect them. But the bottom line is that control is an illusion. The best managers I know have surrendered either to the greater plan that either God has or the universe has, whatever their conception of a higher power is. But the other thing is they also know how to delegate, and they know in times of stress they can say, "Okay, here's how I'm gonna surrender to this person and say that I trust that this person is going to handle what needs to be handled, so that I can become grounded." And this makes the organization better. And I've worked with micromanagers, and it's not fun because they have to control everything. And
It's exhausting.
well, it's exhausting for them. And I think it's also for their health.
Yeah.
It's not good. I mean, I worked with one guy who just micromanaged everything, and it ended up, I think, really compromising his health. And he ended up, after he retired, he died a few years after, relatively a young man, but he had to control everything.
Yeah.
And
And the other thing I think we don't recognize sometimes as leaders is that, you know, our poor ways of handling this type of stuff, the control and hustle, it teaches a certain level of culture and behavior to the rest of the organization. And that trickle down effect is not healthy either. And so I need to realize that, I have the ability to influence them in a good way or a bad way based on how I learn to handle what I trust in my life.
if the CEO is constantly under stress, is constantly anxious, and it's visible, that energy is going to rub off on the rest of the organization, because this is a person that they look up to ostensibly because they felt that he had the skills to manage through crisis. And when he's having difficulty managing crisis, and it's obvious, the rest of the organization is going to react, and they're going to also become less equipped to deal with crisis based on their manager's response to stress.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Let's talk about your book, The Heart of Legacy.
Yeah.
What do you want readers to take away from it? And also tell us what it's about.
Well, it's done by the legacy architect, so it had to have legacy in the name. So it's the heart of legacy, and it's about having a focused, faithful, and fearless life. So it's divided into 3 sections. The first section is my story more in depth, and it also goes into our story of adopting our children and all that stuff that we haven't really talked about yet today, but that's in there, and how we can learn the whole center section is about how I can be faithful, how I can be focused, how I can be fearless. It is full of nothing but application in there. Gives you wonderful ideas like the next best step. We talk way more about it. So if you're in a stuck place, it's a really good thing. And then if you want to grow to the next level, it's got these great nuggets in there. And then the back third of the book is all stories of life change that have come through the work of the ministry. It's just fun to read those stories and be inspired by the choices that these guys and gals have made and the hard work that they've done to get their lives in a better place. So that book is a free gift to your audience. They literally just need to go to theheartoflegacy.com and they can get it and they'll get it for free. So that's my blessing to help them figure out the next step for them.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure that gets in the episode notes that all they have to do is go to theheartoflegacy.com. And if they've listened to the podcast or, they can get a free copy of the book. Thank you, Debbie. That's very generous.
Yes, my pleasure.
Very, very generous. We haven't talked about adopting 9 kids, all from trauma backgrounds. So we need to talk about that part of it because I know I'm sensing that is also going to contribute to the legacy you're going to leave behind when you go to, your next existence. So
Yeah.
tell us what drove that decision to hire 9 children from trauma backgrounds and just talk a little bit about their backgrounds to the extent that you're comfortable with so that we get an idea of who your family is.
Yeah, I have adopted 9 children. We adopted 3 different times, a sibling group of 5, a sibling group of 2, and then a sibling group of 2. I think it was only about 2 years ago that we finally finished hormones and driver's ed.
That could be a lethal combination.
I know, and it was a lot of years. But after we lost the boys, we still had this desire to have children, and God took me out of engineering into seminary and to ministry work. And then we were sitting there one day, and I was like, if we're gonna have children, we need to get serious about this because it took a long time last time. And we ended up in a discussion about would we consider adoption? And we hadn't really thought about it before, but we started bantering it around and, questions like, can you love someone that's not your blood and stuff? And I figured that one out because I'm like, I love my husband and he ain't my blood. And so we just chose to begin to explore looking for children who were legally free in our foster care system that needed homes. And that is how we ended up adopting. And we really thought we were just doing one adoption, but God surprised us and we did it 2 more times. And so now I have 15 grandkids, and they're a ton of fun. And there's a joy of my life. And so my kids, my youngest one is turning 21 this week.
Wow.
And my oldest is 34. And we have had, and so their backgrounds include abuse and neglect. You have everything you can pretty much think of. You have sexual abuse, you have verbal abuse, you have just being neglected and left alone, and you have everything you can kind of think of in those stories. And so, what we thought was hard about parenting biological children, you just add complexity onto that. And so it really stretched us and grew us as a couple. I have had to grow way more than my children have had to grow because, God wants to make sure I'm healed so that I can be the mom I need to be. And my kids are really good at finding my buttons. And so they have taught me a lot. It's an interesting parenting journey to stay in the difficult while kids learn to be safe, that they feel safe and that they can work through their stuff. And that's taken some of them years, and some of them still have stuff they're working through, but we're still here walking alongside of them. And sometimes they choose life choices as they got to be adults that weren't ones that I was super happy with, but we've learned and we've loved and I had a daughter that was on the streets for years with addiction, and I've had one that's been in and out of prostitution. I have ones with felonies. So I have all kind of fun stuff, but these are my kids and I want to stay with them, and they're great kids, and God is writing a great story with them. But some days are hard, and that's okay because these are my kids, and I will do what I need to do to be there alongside of them. So regardless of their backgrounds, those are my children. And I want to do what I can do to be in their lives and helping them build their legacies. God is writing a good story with them. There's been a lot of heartache, but I'm doing my daughter that was on the streets. She's 3 years sober, and it's a beautiful story of the woman that she's becoming. But maybe if she wouldn't have been in my life, maybe we'd have lost her to the world.
Mhm.
So I would say adoption is a wonderful journey. We have loved it, and we love to help training families. That's part of why we do our therapeutic camps at Anchor Point, is to help families understand how to work with the children that they have so that they can stay connected and get to the heartstrings and help these kids overcome the hard things that they have faced, because they certainly didn't deserve anything that they faced. But they're resilient. Kids are resilient. It's amazing to me.
And the early experience matters, and the experiences that your children had, they didn't have any choice over that. This is what they were exposed to. And they developed, I think, in terms of what they knew, what they saw, because they may not have known any other way until
Yeah.
you and your husband adopted them and showed them that there is a different way. And
Yeah.
but the biggest thing is, we can look at, prostitution. Those are all labels. Those are behaviors. But
Mhm.
behind the behavior, there's some great human beings. And if we treat the behavior not at the expense of the self-esteem of the child, of the adult, then we're going to find out that we have some pretty impactful and really fine young men and women. And as long as we look beyond labels and look into their
Yeah.
soul and look
Yeah.
to who they are, not what
Mhm.
they do, but who they are.
Yeah, and that
That's
is
where the
what we
man.
teach. That's what we teach people in camp, is to help them understand that you have to be able to look, and I have to be well enough and whole enough, me as a mom, to be able to stay in that space, to be able to get to looking into their eyes and
Mhm.
pulling out who they really are. And I have always told my kids, I said, "You have maladaptive behaviors," and I said, "If we could put those to positive use, you would be extremely powerful."
Well, I used to work as an addictions counselor with individuals from all kinds of backgrounds, trauma
Yeah.
backgrounds, individuals who had issues related to authority. And I never tried to really change their behavior. I just tried to rechannel it. I said, let's
Mhm.
see how we can get you from aggressive to assertive. You know, let's
Yeah.
see how we can get you from being manipulative to being persuasive and
Yeah.
those kind of things. Because if you tell somebody they have to change, the two responses they're going to give you is no, I don't have to. And secondly, it's scary for them because that behavior, as we talked about earlier with survival, behavior might have been a survival piece for them to get them.
Well, yeah. And I tell parents is that, if we are going to help these children learn to use their words to get their needs met versus actions, behaviors, and stuff like that, we have to understand that we have to give them the tools to be able to do it. Because when I take away the survival mechanism, and I don't give kids tools, that's really child abuse, because this is how they've survived in the world. And so we have to give them tools and teach the parents how to use those tools with them to meet their needs, stay connected, and then
Yeah.
help them. So it's a whole different way, of kind of walking through the discipline piece and learning to connect, and trust that that is going to, eliminate a lot of the discipline issues in the end. So it's a fun camp that we do, and it works wonders on my own children, but like on my grandkids, who a lot of them now have a little bit of trauma backgrounds too, they will tell you, "I love being at Lolly's because Lolly's is safe." And I'm like, "I like you being here too." And they're great kids, right? That's exactly what you said, is they're absolutely great human beings that
Yeah,
we need to free up from the bondage that they carry.
absolutely. We have to see their potential
Mhm. Mhm.
and we work with their potential.
Yeah. I would.
And
Mm.
I tell my students, I said, look, I don't care what you've done in past classes. I don't care if you're a D average student, but I'm going to treat you as if you're capable of doing some great things. Now, whether you buy into that is up to you, but I'm
Yeah.
never going to stop believing in you that you can do great things.
Mm.
And I communicate that message very clearly the first day of class, and I reinforce it and repeat it periodically throughout the semester. But boy, you've left us with a lot of good things, a lot of good information, a lot of great takeaways and wisdoms, but I want to ask you for one more. Give our audience the one ultimate takeaway you want to leave us with today.
Well, I would say I have two. One is that next best step we already talked about, but the other thing is no matter where you are sitting right now, no matter how many good choices, how many bad choices, whatever that we have made, the truth is the sun comes up tomorrow and it's a new day and we get to begin again. And it's just the next best step, the next best step. And find people in your life that will walk along with you. And that is how we make our way. It's the journey.
Yeah.
So and find a way to enjoy the journey.
And that takeaway reminds me of a quote from Ram Dass is that we're all just walking each other home.
Mhm.
And so let's just walk each other home with dignity, with grace, with compassion, and it's going to be okay.
Mhm.
Debbie, my last question, if people want to find out more about you, connect with Anchor Point, purchase your book, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure, there's a couple. So we already talked about the book. That was theheartoflegacy.com. And if you want to know about Anchor Point, it is actually anchorpoint.us. And you can do things like join the prayer team, even though you live all across the country. And then if you want to know about me and some of the things that I'm doing, it's thedebbisimmons.com. And that will tell you a lot about the different coaching and the speaking and all that type of stuff that I do.
Debbie, thank you so much for spending time with me and my audience today. And I enjoyed our conversation, and I hope we can do it again in the future sometime.
Sure, I'd love that.
Thank you, Debbie. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.